Emil Amok to you. It's good to be here with you today on Tuesday, show 141. Hey, we're going to talk about those topics. I forgot to put up here at show 141 of Emil Amok's Takeout Live. Number 141. That's a lot of shows we've done. We call it What Does an Asian American Think? Subtitle, right? Acronym. WDAAT. And we fill in the void. Yeah, what does an Asian American think? And regular viewers, there needs to be a little guide of how to listen or how to use the Emil Guillermo show, and it's all new. Well, you should know that we're on 2 p Pacific Live, 2 o'clock Pacific Live, Monday through Friday. Live because it's more dangerous that way. Because it's unscripted. I have all this paper around me, but I don't look at it, and it's not scripted. I get something here that says census. So I'm going to talk about the census and some other things. And we're going to talk about COVID, right? We're going to talk about immigration and stop AAPI hate. And Manny Pacquiao is running for president, not of the United States. Maybe of Carson. He might win if he ran for president of Carson, California. Maybe not all of Carson, just the Filipino part. He may not win there. I mean, there's a lot of people. Well, we're going to talk about that. Anyway, this is Emil Muck's Takeout Live number 141. Those of you who know me from the past know that I have done these shows at 2 p.m. Pacific. This is the lanyap part where I just kind of warm up, like you see the football players that are in full unis, going out there and they're like going, taking the ball and doing all that before the game, right? They're not playing, they're just warming up. That's sort of what I'm doing here until 2 p.m. Pacific or thereabouts. And then we'll go live and then we'll do our show. But I'm going to tell you, we're going to talk about these things. We are going to touch on those things. But the lanyap section, the little something extra, sort of the news meditation part. People know that I've been a news guy. I've been a columnist. I've written for all sorts of publications, not just ethnic publications, some white ones too. And I also have I've been on national programs, NPR, all things considered. But really, where things came together for me is when I started writing for the Stockton Record. I hate to say this because the Stockton Record's it's not a great newspaper. It could be better. It's got different owners. That's a problem. It's owned by an equity firm. When it was family owned, it was great. When it covered Stockton well, it was great. It's all right now. Of course, it was not great when it was a racist paper, really against, Filipinos assimilating, saying Filipinos were unassimilable. Can you believe that? And this was in the 20s and 30s. That paper has a long racist history, as do many papers in America. Anyway, so I've been doing this sort of thing. So whenever there's news, I say, I got to talk about it. I did news talk radio all over the country, Washington, D.C., Sacramento, San Francisco. So just a quick scan of the headlines is part of your lanyap, your little something extra. You got to note that, hey, our COVID cases are up nationwide 4%, according to the stats in the New York Times. 14-day change up 4%. 42 million total cases reported. Of course, the number I like to look at is the number of deaths. It's more than any war in American history. 676,191. My God. And so I see all these people walking around thinking like, oh, we're back to normal. We're okay again. We're not back to normal. We're not okay again. We're not where we should be. Not unless you take a moment to think about those 676,191 deaths. My God. And look, the news today is that vaccines are essentially safe for those 5 to 11. So maybe we can vaccinate the entire country. But we're still at about 60%. We're not where we should be, 70 to 80% vaccinated, because there are people out there who still say they don't want to take the chance of getting vaccinated. You're taking a chance not getting vaccinated. So, for those of you who believe that the internet is some kind of wasteland, I want this show to be the antidote to all of those other shows that spread misinformation. I want to be the show that says, "Hey, get vaxxed, please. Get vaccinated." Your kids can't yet, but I see they're giving out double doses in some places, or booster shots rather. That would be like a triple dose. But if you haven't gotten the first dose or first set, go get a pair. Then worry about the booster later. I'm not worried about the booster yet. My vaccination is still good. Of course, I waited in line to get mine. So, around Thanksgiving, I'll be thinking about the turkeys and thinking about if my vaccine still works. But man, I think the number that gets me always is that 676,191 deaths. Totally preventable. Totally preventable. What are you doing about that? You could do something. Get vaccinated. Right now, fully vaccinated. 65 and up. Of course, they're 83% vaccinated. 83%. That's good because, people 65 and up, they're freaked out, and also they have other conditions. And so at least one dose, 65 and up have 93%. So older people, the OGs are vaccinated. And yet the death that has gotten me more teary-eyed than any of the deaths, any of the 676,000 deaths, the death of my friend Corky Lee, who is the OG of OGs. My goodness. And he died before the vaccine was available, I believe. Before it was available. Those 12 and up, fully vaccinated, only 64%. We got to do better, right? We got to be in the 70s. And all ages, you count all ages, 55% fully vaccinated. Not good enough. Not going to cut it in America. Now, I know there are arguments about, other countries aren't, the Philippines, other countries in Asia aren't fully vaccinated. Some countries in Asia have that Chinese vaccine, which is questionable. But honestly, we got to get those vaccination rates up. I talk about Little Manila Rising, which is a group in Stockton, the Stockton area. They're going door to door. They're part of the Get Out the Vaccine drive in California. And these the same kind of campaign as the Get Out the Vote drive. Door to door, they knock, they give information, they get people. They've had guns pulled on them, but they're doing their part in the COVID war. That's what it takes. Because when you have 676,000 deaths, that's 676,000 deathbed conversions that you're going to rely on to say, hey, I guess I better take the vaccine because, my buddy died or my favorite right-wing talk show host has died. Not mine. I don't have a favorite right-wing talk show host. But really. So anyway, I like to meditate on the vaccine and the virus to start. And it pains me when I see people going out there doing their thing, pretending like, we don't have to get masked. Everyone is vaccinated. Well, some of us are, and a lot aren't. And we're still on the honor system, except some places are demanding that you show a vaccine card. Well, then it's going to be like people drinking when they're under 21, right? Oh, look at my fake ID. Look at my fake vaccine. It's happening. It's happening. Terrible. All right, the news. I look at the New York Times, I look at the Washington Post just to scan the news. Of course, they're talking about Biden at the UN. Like, okay, yeah, I'm all for Biden at the UN. That's great, but there's some problems. New York Times helping him out by not showcasing the Haiti crisis or the Haitian migrant crisis. It's at Del Rio, Texas border. But you turn on all the cable channels and they've got cameras saying, hey, look at these people under the bridge in Del Rio, Texas. And look at those pictures of the Border Patrol on horseback. When I saw the Border Patrol on horseback, it reminded me of the American Army in the Philippines fighting off the Philippine rebels as the Philippines and the U.S. went to war, 1898 to about 1902 or thereabouts, as the United States went to colonize the Filipinos. Terrible pictures at the border of the Border Patrol on horseback, and it's just so sad because most of those Haitian immigrants, by way of Latin America, right? They went from Haiti to Latin America. They went they came up to. They're just looking for, if you are familiar of driving along Highway 5 or Highway 99 in California, they're just looking for a Love's. They're just looking for a Flying J, someplace where they can, like, you know, follow the truckers and take a bath or take a shower, go to I mean, and all they got is the Rio Grande. It's a terrible crisis. So all that amidst Biden, getting his, his baptism at the UN. The other top of the fold story in the New York Times is Trump campaign new voting machine claims were baseless. Memo shows, of course, because Trump is just a liar, or Trump campaign. Trump just does what Trump does. They're talking specifically about Sidney Powell, the Trump lawyer, and all of Trump's cronies like Giuliani. Of course, they knew. This is about lying. They have taken the whole stereotype of the lying politician and made it the reality. Hey, we're it's like, instead of stabbing you in the back, we're going to stab you in the front, kind of thing. We're just going to be obvious about it. That's what they did. It's terrible. It just makes you sick about how we've got to fight. Good people, good citizens of this country have to deal with the misinformation that is caused by the politicians. If they knew that their claims about voting machines being bogus and fixed and rigged, if they knew it was baseless, why did they do it? And why did they cause this calamity throughout the electorate, where a majority of Republicans believe that Trump won the last election because of those baseless claims? It is just ridiculous, the lying rhetoric that has kept Trump sort of afloat there in a kind of, with a sense of power, even though the Biden administration is in. January 6th did not work. It did not decertify the election. And yet there's Trump still maintaining a voice. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Thank goodness for California, right? And the recall election, which showed that, hey, I checked I checked the Secretary of State's site. I mean, they update all the precincts have reported in California on the recall, but not all the votes have counted because there's some mail-ins and some provisionals. And right now, the no on recall, the one that saves Gavin Newsom's butt, I have 63% of the vote, or 6.9 million votes. The yes on recall has only 37% of the vote, or about 4 million votes. So we're talking about a 2.9 million vote difference, which is still a landslide. I've been waiting for Larry Elder to come out and say, yeah, Trump is right. The election was rigged. Here's what we're finding out. The election was rigged but it was really rigged for Elder. And he's such a terrible candidate, he couldn't make it work for him. Emil, you're saying it was rigged for Elder? Yeah, yeah. Here's what I mean. You got the yes vote, right? Yes, no on the recall. And if the yes recall wins, then you go to the question number 2. Who are the candidates? 46 candidates. The leading vote getter among the candidates with 47% of the vote, Larry Elder, with ironically 2.9 million votes, which is the margin. It's a strange coincidence. The margin that the no vote has defeated the yes. But Larry Elder got 2.9 million votes in this sort of moot question 2, who shall replace Newsom, that was made moot because question 1 was defeated. The no's won that. But it was rigged for Elder because if the yeses had won, Larry Elder could have been governor with a mere 2.9 million votes on question 2, which is about 5 million, 6 million votes less than elected Gavin Newsom 3 years ago. That's why I say it was rigged for Elder if he were a good enough candidate. But what happened? Californians were scared of Larry Elder. That's why in my Oakland Post column, it's just coming out. I say, "Thank you, Larry Elder. Thank you." Can you can you feel the sarcasm? Can you feel the sarcasm? You got to say thank you, Larry Elder. If it weren't for you, you'd be governor. Yeah, if it weren't for Larry, because Larry Elder was running, he scared the hell out of good Republicans, moderate Republicans, Democrats who were indifferent, right? He said, there's more Democrats than Republicans. We don't have to worry about this. 4 weeks ago, that's what they were saying. Oh, we don't have to worry about this recall election. I'll let the Republicans have their day. Uh-oh. People realize you let the Republicans have their day, Larry Elder gets elected governor with a less than a majority vote, with a mere plurality, 2 million votes, 1 million votes. He could have been elected. Everyone could have laid down. Larry Elder with 1 vote would have won. That's how it was rigged. That's how the whole, recall vote was rigged. That's where the rigging was. So here I am. I'm just waiting for Larry Elder, who said during the on election night last week, he said, "I'm not for. We may have we may have lost the battle, but we're going to win the war." Which means that maybe is he going to find 2.9 million dead people voting, or 2.9 million discrepancies that he's going to, question the defeat of yes, the no votes winning? Or maybe he's just going to crawl back under the rock where I guess all the January 6th protesters were, because they sure weren't in Washington over the weekend. The January 6th protesters were, the majority of the 600 were just released. And they didn't even show up for their own little protest. A lot of them said, like Donald Trump said, "Oh, well, it's a setup, man. It's a setup." Talking like a mafioso. It's a setup. So don't go there. It's a setup. No, the law enforcement was prepared. Well, why wouldn't they? They got sandbagged by a lot of things, by the administration, the Justice Department, communications, everything, because no one expected this kind of baloney to happen on January 6th, 2021, but it happened. People died. Innocent people died. So I saw California and the recall effort as a kind of, it was kind of a January 6ing of California. They almost pulled it off. But the no's won, making the question two on, who should replace Newsom moot. Elder was a top vote getter. He wins the booby prize, right? I mean, he wins the moot vote, which means nothing except, he can go around saying, I won the vote that didn't count. I had the most votes that didn't count. But he did something that we really must thank him for. He ran, and Democrats and moderate Republicans were so scared, they ran to the polls last week, September 14th, and said, we can't have Larry Elder as governor. Anyway, that's the lagniappe. I know I went a little long there. What can I went a little long, but I just got excited. All right, let's talk about the census. The census here on Emil Muck's Takeout. What? Subtitle, what does an Asian American think? Acronym, WDAAT. See, I filled the void. The census. There was a group meeting today on AAPI in California talking about the census. Here's the thing that you need to know about the census if you haven't gotten the word. The browning of America has taken over. The whole idea of America where the minorities are becoming the majority. Well, it's happening sooner than people think, at least 8 to 10 years sooner. It's happening now in some places, at least in California. It's been the minorities have been the majority since 2000. But here's some concerns if you're AAPI. They don't really disaggregate the numbers. We're going to have to wait for the American Community Survey, and we're going to have to wait for other people to go in and really comb through the numbers and figure out, well, what do all these numbers mean? I mean, essentially, it puts, when you're going to count, the Chinese are the number one group. And it used to be Filipinos at one point. Although I think it was close. It depends on the once again who's crunching the data. I know some people claim that it was Filipinos at one point within the last 10 years, but no, it's Chinese. And from the data I saw, well, Filipinos are number 2 in California, but nationwide, it's Chinese, Indian, Filipino. It's Chindapino. We're Chindapinos. Nationwide. In California, Filipinos have a slight edge as number 2. And yet, how many people think of Filipinos as Asian American? There is still, this is something that was discussed. There's still an East Asian bias about what an Asian American is. That's why when I say Shang-Chi, it's great. We're on film. We're marvelized. Some people say, hey, yeah, great. They applaud. And some people who want to be like broad, it's almost like you have to have a zoom lens going in and out. Okay, I'm broad again, I'm out again. I'm broad again, or I'm broad again, I'm zoomed out. I'm in again, just looking at just us, my group. This is what happens when you have so many groups under the banner of API. And of course, I always mention Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders. Well, it's a kind of shorthand. I intend, or I imply Native Hawaiians, but Native Hawaiians like to see them mentioned in the AANHPI, Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, Anipiem. And during Anipiem month in May, I did mention that. But it's easy to forget the Native Hawaiian. It's easy to forget the Pacific Islander. It's not an intentional erasure, but it is a de facto one. And that's a concern. And I've done stories on how COVID affected Pacific Islanders far more, 10, 12 times more than whites, but certainly, greater than the broader Asian American community. Anyway, a lot of problems with the census. And if you don't think the census is still a civil rights issue, it is. It determines everything. And frankly, that's one of the problems. One of the big problems. The first one was, hey, we got to disaggregate the data, because when it comes to everything from healthcare and education and resources, we can't tell who needs what. We got to be able to drill down and understand that. So that was a thing I sat in on today that is of concern. I just wanted to let you know that people are concerned about that and people are trying to figure it out, and that how it affects organizations is, okay, well, the money's coming from the feds, it's trickling down to the state, and everyone's got to figure out how to allocate that money. That's where it becomes an issue. And so don't think it's not an issue. So census disaggregation still not happening, should be happening. We talked about COVID, talked about little Manila going door to door. Let me talk about Stop AAPI Hate, because that's related to COVID. Because, if you're still upset for some reason that COVID was caused by the China virus, I think that's been somewhat mitigated because Donald Trump hasn't been in office. But there's still anti-vaxxers out there. There's still people out there who insist that they're not getting vaccinated. They don't trust the government. And so they, of course, remember Trump saying China flu, Trump saying anti-Asian stuff. They're the ones who look at an Asian American and think ill if they feel like their freedoms have been somewhat compromised because of COVID. Who are they going to blame? I mean, look, this is just the beginning of this. Because once we go into full China is both friend and foe, China is, they steal our intellectual property, they do this, they do that. Oh, but we wear their clothes. They may steal all our films and all our, digital rights and games and all that. But our clothes are made there. I mean, if they're not made in some other place that American capitalists exploit. But I just want to read you Senator Mazie Hirono. She's out there fighting not just for Hawaii, she's fighting for all Asian Americans. She's in the Senate, and thank God, right? She and Congressman Grace Meng out of New York passed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, right? Alarmed by the Stop AAPI Hate stuff. So they wrote to Attorney General Garland. Letter went out yesterday, waiting for a reply. Didn't see any reply come up. But this is the letter. They said the enactment of the law was an historic step to fight the surge of hate-based violence during the pandemic. We appreciate your work to begin implementation of the law. As the sponsors, we'd like to raise specific aspects of this law that are critical to its effectiveness. We request your attention to these matters and periodic updates as you continue to implement the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act and work to reduce the violence from xenophobia and hate in our country. So it's really pretty much, hey, here's a nudge. If you're not doing enough, here's what you should be doing, and here's why. So back to the letter from Hirono and Grace Meng, who, as I said, they issued this from both their offices. Since the beginning of the pandemic, hate crimes incidents against AAPI, the early months of 2021, they've surged. Increased violence reported against Asian seniors. This was followed by the shootings in Atlanta, where a shooter murdered 8 people, 6 of whom were Asian women. I mean, that's kind of like top line knowledge, but you should know that. Early months of 2021, increased violence reported against Asian seniors, 65 and plus. Hey, you're looking at one. Hey, OG, right? This was followed by shootings in Atlanta, 8 people murdered, 6 of whom Asian women. These crimes against people of Asian descent helped galvanize support for the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. Yet, the expedited review called for in this law was intentionally crafted to apply to all hate crimes occurring during COVID-19 pandemic, regardless of which protected characteristic was targeted. So it was a way to water down the law and make it less effective. In May, a wave of anti Semitic attacks occurred in person and online following an outbreak in violence against or between Israel and Hamas. Additionally, in 2020, at least 44 transgender or gender nonconforming people were killed, some as a result of anti transgender bias. For purpose of the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, crimes against people from all these groups should be included in the Justice Department's review. Okay, so it wasn't a matter to water down. It was a matter to be inclusive. It's a way of saying, hey, look, not just Asians are getting hated on. There's anti-Semitism, there's gay bashing and, crimes against the LGBTQ plus community. 44 transgender or gender nonconforming people killed in 2020. In addition to expediting review of hate crimes, the law requires DOJ, Department of Justice, to issue guidance to state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies. Specifically, Section 4A1 calls for guidance on how to establish online reporting for hate crimes as well as incidents. So all these things should be included. And then they buttress this with how many acts of discrimination do not rise to a level of hate crime. So they want to say, hey, look, the inclusion of incidents was intentional and a critical component for any reporting system. So let's be inclusive. For March 2020 through June 2021, one organization received reports of more than 9,000 incidents against AAPI. 2/3 of the incidents were verbal harassment, and shunning made up the largest category. I think sometimes I've been shunned because I'm Asian. Oh, I'm shunned by other Asians. So, well, these actions are unlikely to rise to the level of hate crime. The impetus for these actions are the same: fear and xenophobia. In order to meaningfully address the root causes of this bias and hostility, we need a clear and full picture of the scope of the problem. Data on hate crimes alone is insufficient. So what they're saying is broaden this out again. You got to count if there are microaggressions, people getting dissed, people using, the hate crime laws are such that if you call someone a name, that's not a hate crime, but that's something. You got to count it. Lastly, the expansion of public education campaigns aimed at raising awareness of hate crimes and reaching victims should be linguistically appropriate. This is always an issue when it comes to AAPI. In order to reach victims and empower them to come forward and report what happened to them, campaign material must be culturally sensitive and available in different languages. Ignoring those factors will only ensure that some victims will never be reached. Get it together, guys. Understand. If you're going to have a law and the law is going to reach people who are being discriminated against and they don't speak English, you got to put it in language that they understand, in their native language. And then you got to encourage them to come forward. Always been an issue in the AAPI community. So last month, back to the letter, the FBI released the hate crime stats for 2020. Hate crimes have risen to the highest level in 12 years, led by an increase in attacks against Black and Asian people. Always go after the Blacks. Now they're going after the Asians. As has long been suspected and anecdotally reported, hate crimes against Asians rose by more than 70% to 274 incidents. Yet this is almost guaranteed to be a fraction of actual hate crimes due to underreporting by both victims and law enforcement. Notably, most agencies report zero hate crimes, including 64 jurisdictions with populations over 100,000. Zero hate crimes they report. What's happening? Well, you got a problem with this underreporting. This is always a problem. Underreporting of hate crimes, underreporting in the census, undercount, under this. We just don't really know. And if you know, this is why you get your representatives. This is why it's important to have political representatives like Mazie Hirono and Grace Meng to get out there, get the legislation passed. No small feat. If you recall how difficult it was to get it past pro-Trump types who they were obstacles to get this done, but it passed. Last two graphs. As the pandemic wears on and COVID-19 variants cause states, localities, or private entities to reinstate restrictions or public safety mandates, frustration with the virus will undoubtedly resurface. We fear the impact this could have on perpetuating hate-based violence against people. Full implementation of the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act will help stem the tide against further violence. We appreciate your leadership on combating hate crimes and applaud your efforts. Signed, Mazie Hirono, Grace Meng. That's the letter. It went out yesterday. Merrick Garland is a good guy. I know he wants to do things, but you see the how multiple fronts, there's a lot of stuff going on, right? And this is always the case. I mean, you got Biden at the UN. Meanwhile, Haiti, he's got the COVID. It's not Haiti, it's Del Rio, Texas. It's the Haitians at Del Rio, Texas. Every time you drive under one of those bridges, just got to think that there's like 50 Haitians there. I mean, that you just got to be a reminder. Every time you go through an overpass, think of like 100 Haitians there. Not just the 10 homeless people from your area with signs that say, "Can you spare $1? Hungry." This is the state of America. But what we have to do, this is where we understand and we develop that empathy muscle and say, yeah, I understand we are one. We are not far. We're not that different from the Haitians who went from Latin America, from Haiti to Latin America, and now they find themselves in Del Rio, Texas. We all have something we need. We all have something that requires action. But instead of division, we should, take note of our different things that we are clamoring for, but we should also come together and understand. And when I say come together, not just people on one side, the immigrants, although certainly, the problem with the Haitians at the border of Del Rio, they are the plan is to not let them in. They've been deporting them back to Haiti, which is mind-boggling. Just like you wouldn't deport a dreamer because dreamers who came here to the United States as children don't really have a life back where you're deporting them to. So a huge problem, really. And I think the only way out is if there can be comprehensive immigration reform, but we are at a place where now, and this is the real problem, we're in a place where the Biden administration is in trouble and the Republicans know it. And the sad thing is, where there may have been some hope of finally, maybe now with the Biden administration, we get comprehensive immigration reform. I mean, it's bad enough when it was just the southern border was just, you know, Latinx people coming up from the south trying to enter. But now we have that still, and we have this new Haitian situation, and now we have this broader political thing where there's a possible shutdown if we don't raise the debt limit. There's a financial crisis because of stalemate in the House over infrastructure and spending. And now all the things that look like, oh, well, we'll get this in the so-called reconciliation plan, which is a way, it's a it's a procedural method. Clinton used it to get a budget passed where you don't need all the votes to get something through. You don't need, you don't need as many votes to get something through, reconciling the budget. But now even that is in danger because the moderates aren't cooperating and you need every Democrat behind you. So we're in a different kind of mess. If Trump were in our president, we'd have a worse mess, and we'd be like at minus 50. And now with Biden, we're still not below zero, but we were boosted way high in the positive, and now we're down. Certainly higher than we would be if a Trump administration were there. But there's challenges now that are, I know, the prospects of getting immigration through, not good. Or getting some kind of immigration change, not good. Not when you have, like I said, these ongoing immediate crises, you're not going to get the votes. All right, so we talked about census, COVID, immigration, stop AAPI hate. One more, Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao is running for president of the Philippines. Now, this is important to me because I know some of you think, Emil, you don't know how to box. Come on. Boxing, Emil, really? Hey, come on. Look, I know how to do the Philly shell. Those of you who are watching this on YouTube say, hey, he really knows the Philly shell. Where, he like uses his arm to like, jab, jab, and then and counter. Okay, I know this. I took online boxing courses. You think I wasted my COVID time? Nah, I was taking the, online boxing. I did, sadly. No, I was taking online meditation courses. Come on, I'm into self improvement. I'm Asian American, always 100% self improvement. I'm going to be better. I'm going to be better. Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao. Let's see. Here's the dispatch. Boxing icon and senator Manny Pacquiao says he will. Oh yeah, says he will run. I thought it said not there for a second. I said, did my glasses failing me? He will run for president in the 2022 elections. Mr. Pacquiao accepted the nomination of the PDP Laban Party and its national convention on Sunday, which would have been Saturday, which is, well, why am I only mentioning it on Tuesday? Well, I'm just letting it simmer. Pledging to serve the Filipino people who said have been waiting for change. Waiting for change? Oh no, he's going to be the change agent? The change to boxing? I don't know. Manny Pacquiao, world champion, is president of the PDP Laban faction, led by him and Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III. Another faction of the party this month nominated President Rodrigo Duterte to its vice presidential candidate, and Mr. Duterte's former aide, Senator Bong Go, it's got to be a bong, as its presidential nominee. So Duterte has been forbidden by the Constitution. Thank goodness for the Constitution. He can't seek a second 6-year term, but he's accepted the nomination. Mr. Go has declined to run for president. And so we have the prospects of a Pacquiao Duterte ticket, where guess who's going to be the puppet and guess who's going to be the puppeteer? I mean, Manny Pacquiao is a boxer, but he's not a smart guy. He's smart in other ways. But you're talking about being a governor or governing an archipelago. I just do not like the sound of a Manny Pacquiao presidency. And this coming from a guy who, in 2008, 2009, saw Manny Pacquiao as the future. I thought he was going to be the rock star. Then I heard him talk. I said, you go back to boxing, Manny. You are great. You should make movies. You should do karaoke. But doing karaoke where you are mouthing the ideas of Duterte, the Philippines does not need. Well, I don't know if he's going to mouth he says he's the change candidate. But how much change would it be if Duterte is his vice president? I think the KDP Laban party has some issues here. Or the PDP, excuse me. The KDP is another one. This is the thing about the Philippines. The Philippines has like 6 parties. They're a partying nation. And, there was a New York Times article that suggested, oh, well, maybe we should have 5 parties, 6 parties in America. I don't know. Then you'd have factions, but then you'd have to have people working together. Would it work? I don't think so. Look at the Philippines. It becomes a semi-functional, dysfunctional democracy, which I guess is kind of redundant. It's semi-functionally dysfunctional, which means it only not runs well some of the time. Okay. I think we've reached our limit. No, first, I mentioned this yesterday. I teased this yesterday. One of the things that I got from talking to, one of the things I talked, that was talked about before, in the show, I talked about the census. And people were talking about working together with other groups. So this kind of segues from multi-parties. Can people work together? We're Asian American. We are just 6% of the country. 6% is nothing. We are a little larger, in the state, but once again, not large enough to control a majority. To do that, we need to work together. How are we going to do that? Reach out. Asian Americans reaching out to blacks, Asian Americans reaching out to Latinx. I heard today about some things where Filipinos are reaching out to Latinx out in the Central Valley to bring back the spirit of the labor movement that brought Filipinos, Asian Americans, and Mexican Americans together. The farm workers. They're farm workers still, Filipino and Chicano, Mexican American. And they're still working in the fields. My dog knows that. Hear my dog barking. Oh, it's true. I'll show my dog. So I'm encouraged when I hear that because we have to work together and we have to form coalitions. And it's in that spirit that I end this show talking about Yolanda Lopez, who died in San Francisco at age 78. Now, if you don't know Yolanda Lopez, New York Times did a big thing on her yesterday, her big obit. And I maybe this is the thing when you get to a certain age, you read obits because I got to see if someone I knew died. I mean, when I worked for Congressman Mineta, one of the things he wanted to see, he wanted to make sure he got the JACL newspaper because that was the only way that he knew that friends of his throughout the years had passed away. It was important. So here's the thing about Yolanda Lopez. Yolanda Lopez, she was an artist and she was active. 1969, she was a founding member of a group called Los Siete de la Raza. Now, if you grew up in San Francisco like I did, this was Free Los Siete, the seven young Latino men charged with killing a police officer. They were later acquitted, but Free Los Siete, that was a big thing. And I remember being a Filipino kid in the Mission District, seeing Free Los Siete signs all over. So I was a young kid. I wasn't, certainly my mom wasn't letting her 12-year-old boy go out there to protest, but I just remember Free Los Siete was a thing if you grew up in the San Francisco's Mission District. But she ultimately ended up at San Francisco State, Yolanda Lopez. She was part of the Third World Liberation Front. And, this was the key that formed the College of Ethnic Studies, that formed Asian American Studies. Professor Dan Gonzalez, who I've interviewed, a good friend of mine, he knows how important the passing of Yolanda Lopez was because that Third World Liberation Front, they were a driver in getting ethnic studies in San Francisco State. So I honor Yolanda Lopez today, and I mostly honor her because she was an artist with vision and a sense of humor. She would see the Virgin Mary and she would paint the Virgin Mary in all these different ways. And she imagined the Virgin Mary as a runner. She had discovered running later in life. And so she saw the Virgin Mary not as, well, as all sorts of icon. It was, first of all, it's an iconic figure. But, she would draw the Virgin Mary as a homemaker. She would draw her as a runner. She would draw her as a, and I saw that, and it's in the Times. I don't have my document camera on. I knew there was a reason why I wanted my document camera on, and it's for this reason. But let's see if I have it on here. Those of you with, let's see if it's okay. So there's the Virgin Mary. Those of you who are watching us live can see the Virgin Mary. See the Virgin Mary? And here's her Virgin Mary there. Yolanda Lopez. And I guess they're Asian American Catholics. Sure, they're Asian American Catholics. Because the Asian American Catholics, they took over the International Hotel. Well, it's not necessarily the Asian American Catholics, but it was the Asian American, or there was a Catholic Church that took over an Asian American thing, the I Hotel. They have like 90% of it, and they left the Filipinos a corner there in San Francisco on Kearny Street. Anyway, I just want to honor Yolanda Lopez in case you don't know who she is. It was in her obituary was in the New York Times. And what drew me, I mean, she got on the front page of the Times with a little line saying she imagined the Virgin Mary as a runner. And I said, wow, as a Filipino American Catholic, I said, I got to see what this woman's about. And then I got into her history and I said, this woman was connected to me much closer than I thought. From growing up in the mission, Free Los Siete, that whole movement, 7 men charged with, in a police officer altercation, later acquitted. People of a certain age, they will remember that. And then the whole ethnic studies thing, the strike, San Francisco State. Got to remember these people. They're the OGs of worth. Okay, now one last thing before I go, I'm going to check the chat. Sometimes I don't check it right away. I talked about COVID, and yes, a friend of mine, Tamiko, says yes, Corky passed before the vaccine was available. I know, because there's no way that Corky wouldn't have gotten the vaccine if it were available. I mean, he died in January, and the vaccines didn't come out till like February, March. Sad. 676,000 COVID deaths. We are not out of this. Anyway, everyone, thank you for joining me. This is show 141. If you know what I call, what does an Asian American think? And then here's featuring me. I'm an Asian American. Here's what I think. I'll tell you what I think. I'm not shy. Monday through Friday, we're here. Monday through Friday. You can follow me on Twitter at Emil Amok. See more at amok.com. You can email me, Emil at amok.com. This is the Micro Talk Show, the AAPI, the AANHPI, the AAXs. But hell, like I said, we're all in this together. We're all in the same boat. That's what John Lewis said that. John Lewis, Representative of Georgia, the good trouble guy. John Lewis said, we're in the same boat. So I respect and remember the good trouble line. But the line I remember is when he said in one of his famous speeches, I think it was the one that commemorated the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. He said, hey, we're on the same boat. We are in the same boat. Don't miss the boat. If you were with us for our Lanyap section, I went on about the recall. But the real Lanyap comes here. The news meditation. Think about each other. Think about ourselves. You felt shame lately? You're worthy. You're capable. Don't let anyone say otherwise. You are worthy of love. Get past the shame. Do your thing. Time for a little love and compassion. So, as I do for me, I hope for you. Safety, health, happiness, and I hope you live with ease. Ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Back tomorrow. If you miss this, check it out on YouTube, the YouTube channel. I don't have to do anything. Just go to YouTube. Put down Emil Amok. You'll find it. Show 141. Back again tomorrow. as always, Mahal Gita.